That scholarship program I've dedicated to my grandmother, who she didn't have the opportunity to pursue education beyond the age 10 or 11. And because of that, I think she was very keen on my mom, and she was very keen on me and my sister as her granddaughters to pursue higher education to the highest level that we can.
This is the Gies Download, a podcast from the University of Illinois' Gies College of Business. I'm your host, Tim Sinclair, and today my guest is Nerissa Brown, Associate Professor of Accountancy and Academic Advisor at Gies. As you'll hear, the trajectory of Nerissa's journey was impacted greatly by her mom and grandmother, and now she's using her position and resources to help change the trajectory for others.
I'm originally from Jamaica. I grew up there, went to elementary, high school, and did university there. And when I actually entered university, I wasn't exactly sure what to major in. My mom is a first generation college student, and she went back to school when we were kids. I think I was about 7 when she decided to pursue, a bachelor's degree at our local university, the University of the West Indies. And she did management studies. So when I went to university, again, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And so I was like, all right, I'll just do management studies like my mom, because it was a degree where you did a little bit of everything in the business school. I think I had a sense that I probably would go into business. Of course, when I was in high school, I thought I wanted to be a dentist, but I took one of those professional surveys and dentist wasn't in the top 3.
So while dentistry wasn't in her future, Nerissa decided to keep looking for the perfect fit. And when she took her first accounting class,
Loved it. I actually really liked the fact that the grading was less uncertain or less ambiguous, because when you're doing exams and quizzes in accounting, you can actually know if you get the answer right, like if the debits and the credits balance. Um, so through that, I could automatically know, like, yeah, I got the answer right. Versus some of the other courses were a little bit more subjective, maybe a little bit more writing heavy, and sometimes you weren't sure if you were on the right track while sitting in an exam. So I did like the fact that accounting was that way. If you followed the rules, you'd end up getting the right answer in some ways.
in fact, Nerissa liked the classes so much that she went on to get both her bachelor's and master's degrees back to back.
In my master's degree, I ended up taking a course on accounting theory that actually shows like the gray parts of accounting, and the fact that even though you do have rules and standards to follow, there's still a lot of grayness with respect to the rules, and there's still a lot of choices that firms have to make in actually applying the rules. And I like the fact that I learned a lot about that. That kind of sat in my mind even when I started to work, that, hey, I really like thinking about the theoretical and the principle side of accounting practice.
After entering the working world for a few years, Nerissa began to explore the idea of getting back into academia.
And so I actually went back to my university professors. A couple of them did their PhDs in the US and the UK. And I had a chat with them to say, hey, what is it like being on an academic career path? What are the things that you do as professors? And when they shared with me what their life was, and also the flexibility, I was like, okay, I think this is something that I would want to embark on. And so I took the plunge and applied for PhD programs here in the US. And quick story, I applied to 10 programs. I think I really wasn't sure what I was getting into. I applied to 10 programs, got into only one. You only need one offer, right?
That's right. That's like selling a house. It only takes one.
Yeah. Got one offer to the University of Maryland in the College Park, DC area. And yeah, packed my bags and came here and have been on this journey that has, led me to the Gies College.
At the time when you were jumping into your studies and following the footsteps of your mom as a first generation college student, were you aware of all of the barriers, not only for a woman, but a woman of color who's now a second generation college student who's jumping into a probably male dominated field? Was there any realization at the time of all the things that you were going to be going through? Did you find that out later?
I mean, the company that I worked at was pretty much gender diverse, but one thing that I saw when it came to actual individuals in key roles, executive roles within the organization, at the time, it again was very male dominated. And I think that's why I started questioning whether I can be on this path for the rest of my life, because at the time we only had one female executive, two if you count the corporate secretary. And at the time I was thinking, well, for me to be on a path as, like a chief accounting officer or a CFO, I just saw like it would take me a long while to get there based on what I saw in the company that I worked for. And this is where I think I gravitated to academia as a path that was a little bit more inclusive, because the professors that I spoke to were female professors, and they came to here to the U.S., did their degrees. They had challenges, but I think the environment here was also very accepting and very collaborative for them, coming from outside of the US. And so I felt like, hey, this is a path that I can join. Yes, there will be barriers, but I could already see just from my limited view that it was also a very collaborative and inclusive type of career path. And that is something I saw when I went to the University of Maryland. I really enjoyed my time as a doctoral student because, yeah, we're all from different backgrounds, different ethnicities, races within a doctoral program, both in the business school and in economics. And that's where I met a lot of people from different cultures, which is something I was not used to.
Because you're not just teaching students who are going to be professors, you're teaching students who are going to go into that working world and try to make their way up the ladder. Is there a motivation behind what you do to help people of color, women, fill in the blank, who may not necessarily have always had the same opportunities to sort of help them along their path?
Great question. I think especially now, as I am later on in my career, and especially after joining the Gies College, I think I have a much stronger mindset in paying it forward, in the sense that, and I think this is something that I'm really focused on, especially after gaining tenure, after being on the path, the publish or perish path. And so you're like, okay, I've published, I've not perished. And so, I have indefinite tenure at an institution. And this is where I can actually now spend time to pay it forward. Because I think the successes that I've had and where I see myself now compared to, you know, over 20 years ago, and actually seeing, even the path of my mom from doing her first degree, again, as an older student going back to school, which totally changed the trajectory of her career path and also the trajectory of our entire family. I think I am very laser focused on making sure that I work with students, um, both in undergrad and grad, and also working with faculty members who are embarking on an academic career. So just working across that spectrum to mentor and to provide opportunities for students to gain higher education, especially a graduate education that can then help them to set themselves apart in the professional field, and also to change their trajectory and to change the lives of their families.
And you've done that in a very tangible way, obviously, through your work as a professor, but also through a couple of scholarships, as I understand it, that you have created to help sort of change the trajectory of other families. Talk to me about why you decided to do that. That I don't believe is incredibly common for a professor, certainly an acting professor, to start.
This is the power of Geese and why I love being here, because I feel like the things that I'm able to do is a lot because I'm here at Geese. It's a top ranked institution, a very well funded institution with a great set of alumni that give back to Geese and to its students. So scholarship wise, as soon as I joined the Geese, I was invited to work with a scholarship program that was crafted by Brooke Elliott, who is our Executive Associate Dean of Programs, and Kevin Jackson, who's our Associate Dean of Undergraduate Affairs. And that scholarship program is targeted towards underrepresented minority students in accounting to join our master's program. And we identified these students from their junior year, primarily at institutions outside of Illinois. Most of our students are from the Chicagoland area, from smaller schools that may not have a master's program. Another scholarship program that I'll talk about is a diversity fellowship program that we do have. We select students across multiple facets of, a broad definition of diversity. So underrepresented students, female students, first generation students, students that can impact within Geese or culture of inclusiveness and diversity. And I feel like these scholarship programs that I worked with, I think also resonated with me in such a way that I felt like I personally also needed to kind of give back to the Geese College. And so one thing that I worked on over winter break is working with our Office of Advancement to create a scholarship program, a small, teeny tiny scholarship program, which I've personally funded, also as a way to kind of give back. It's something that has been in the back of my mind for over 10 years now, and saying, hey, this is something that I want to do personally. And I think being here at Geese, I think I've found that institution that I can definitely see has such a strong commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion that I felt compelled to make that leap in kind of making that small gift to the Geese College. And that scholarship program I've dedicated to my grandmother, who only had an elementary school education. She didn't have the opportunity to pursue education beyond the age 10 or 11. And because of that, I think she was very keen on my mom, and she was very keen on me and my sister as her granddaughters to pursue higher education to the highest level that we can. And so, I mean, she worked well into her 70s to help, fund our family and help fund our educational pursuits, that I also felt compelled that I needed to memorialize her in that way.
While it was fairly easy for Nerissa to tell me why she does what she does, explaining what it is she actually does, well, that was a tad more complex.
So research wise, I do research looking at firms' corporate disclosure. I also do work that ties in behavioral theories, just thinking about how individuals think and behave and how that affects firms' accounting choices as well as their disclosure choices. I think now I do try to make sure that, whatever projects that I'm working on can have impact from both, like a regulatory as well as a standard setting perspective, as well as having impact in sharing new information or creating knowledge that firms can use. And I feel like I've really started to focus on that in the last few years, again, since joining Gies, mainly because before joining Gies, I spent a year as an academic fellow at the US Securities and Exchange Commission. And that's where I really learned a lot about the purpose of accounting in our capital markets system and the fact that our capital market system really cannot function well if we don't have high quality accounting information as well as high quality audit and assurance. And so that year that I spent with that federal agency, I think really put a spotlight on the importance of the accounting discipline and the importance of what we do as accounting academics. So it's not so much about publishing papers, but publishing papers that create knowledge and have an impact to actually make our capital markets more efficient. And I think I've really started to look at my own research and any new projects that I join from that lens. Like, hey, what is the practical influence that I can have? For example, if a reporter calls me up and say, "Hey, Nerissa, I want your thoughts on this that's actually going on in the capital markets." I want to make sure that whatever I'm working on, I can actually help answer those questions, and I can draw on not only my own research but other research as well.
What is something you've learned in your research that has impacted something that a non-academic or someone who's not working as a CFO of a large company would have seen the effects of, where I would go, oh, that's kind of cool because she learned this, now this happens, or this trend is moving in a direction that is changing how me and my family do X, Y, or Z. Is there anything on a more micro level that that jumps to mind?
Well, I think one thing that comes to mind, which ties into what happened a lot last year with respect to the GameStop frenzy and the frenzy that we saw in the marketplace, um, and what we're seeing with respect to individuals, including our own college students, trading in stocks and options using platforms such as Robinhood, etc. I would say on a micro level, being able to add to that conversation is one cool thing where I saw that my research was actually relevant because I've done research that ties in theories related to herd behavior. So, how we as humans and individuals tend to make the same choices as others just because we see everybody doing the same thing. I've also done research related to investor sentiment or the mood of markets. And so thinking about how the collective mood of a set of investors can actually cause bubbles in markets where markets can be over optimistic or over pessimistic. And last year, based on what we saw with GameStop and then the general rise in the markets during the pandemic, really resonated with me as well, just based on the research that I've done. And a reporter actually called me from NBC News to actually contribute to an article related to this very same thing. I also got connected to CNBC that came to campus and did a documentary again about behavioral biases that ties into how individuals trade or gamble. And a lot of this is going on our college campuses where young individuals are participating in the capital markets in this way through platforms such as gaming platforms such as DraftKings, etc. So I felt like from a micro level, like, hey, this is a part of my research that really connected to something that was going on in real time and really resonated with our students in the sense that I was able to present in a business class that we have for undergraduates and talk about this very thing. And I could see for them, they were like, oh, the light bulbs went on because I could tie in these individual and behavioral biases to exactly what's going on with GameStop and the capital markets.
I would imagine going into this, you probably never expected that your research would one day impact sports gambling. I can't imagine that was something that was on your radar screen.
Yeah, because when that reporter from NBC called me and he was like, I landed on one of your papers. This is how the conversation started. I've landed on one of your papers online that looks at investor sentiment. And I just thought I wanted to reach out to you. And I wrote that paper in 2012, and my dissertation was written 2005. And so I would not have guessed that almost, you would say 10 years later or 15 years later, a reporter would be landed on these studies online and saying, hey, let me call up Nerissa Brown and see what she has to think about GameStop. And I was like, really? You're calling me to talk about GameStop? But then as I spoke to him and also the producer at CNBC, I was like, yeah, I've really spent, a lot of time thinking about these type of behavioral biases. So the conversation flowed pretty well because everything that they were talking about that they're seeing in the markets, I was like, this has all been tested many years ago, and these biases always persist. When you think about the dot-com bubble in 2000, the 2000 era and the burst of that bubble, bubbles are always consistent. Like we always see them, and it's just because we're all humans. Investors are all human.
And they're called bubbles for a reason, right? They're fragile and can burst easily.
Yeah, or they can persist for quite some time because individuals as a collective that are trading in the markets, sometimes they see the biases themselves with respect to herding and sentiment. But, the theory talks about the fact that if everybody's doing the same thing, you don't want to be the last person left out, or you don't want to be the person making the opposite decision. So then you just kind of go along with the crowd.
Clearly, Nerissa Brown isn't a crowd follower. She's created her own path, overcoming numerous obstacles along the way, and is now helping other aspiring business students do the same. Be sure to join us for the next Gies Download. In the meantime, you can learn more about the Gies College of Business at giesbusiness.illinois.edu.